Hello, I am here with Vivian Sayward, the founder of Vivacity Sportswear. And Vivian, you had asked a bit about Twitter. So what are your questions as a growing business?
Yes.
Tell me, what are your questions about Twitter? And I'll pretend like I have some answers.
Well, as my business is growing, we're going national. It's been fantastic. I have some followers going on Twitter. I've tied it in with my Facebook page. I am the first to admit I am not a strong Twitter user.
Okay.
And I know there's so many ways as a product-based business.
Yes.
That I can be pushing for lack of a better word, my business on Twitter.
Okay.
So what are some things that you suggest to help me grow my business on Twitter?
Okay, good, awesome. So first, the caveat to this is I am not a Twitter expert. I'm just going to give my experience utilizing Twitter for my business.
Please.
So the first question I have for you, based on something that you mentioned, is you said I tie it into Facebook. What does that mean?
Anytime I post something on Facebook, it is
Posted to Twitter
automatically.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So here's my first piece of advice. Don't do that.
Okay.
It's convenient.
Yes.
It is convenient.
And that's why I did it.
I understand.
Yes.
And that's okay at first, but I'm going to have you stop doing that.
Okay.
Because Twitter is its own. Think of Twitter as, and you'll relate to this, okay? Think of Facebook, and this is not an exact analogy, but think of Twitter as people who live in Boston, and think of Facebook as people who live in Los Angeles, right? They're two different totally markets, and they have different languages.
Yes.
They say things differently. And as somebody who utilizes Twitter a lot, I'm actually just frankly annoyed when somebody pushes me back to Facebook.
Okay.
So two separate things. So my first recommendation is use something like Hootsuite to post.
Okay.
If you are just trying to do that, because there's 17 reasons why I don't want to be pushed back to Facebook, so to speak.
Got it.
So that's number one. If you could go one step beyond that, you do actually want to say different things on Twitter than you do Facebook.
Yes.
So here's what we do with Hera Hub.
Okay.
Again, it may work for you, it may not, but essentially we use Buffer now. We started using Hootsuite. We weren't using the full capability of Hootsuite, so we ended up going with Buffer. And essentially all we want to do is utilize that opportunity to simplify the posting, both on Facebook and Google Plus and Twitter and LinkedIn as well, and for the scheduling feature of that. So we'll post a blog post. Rule number one is ideally you always want to get them back to your website.
Okay.
In general.
Excellent.
So we post a blog. I kind of look at it as a visual. Here's my visual here. We post a blog, and then that just a little bit of info and link back to the blog then goes into all the social media channels from there. Okay. So at every opportunity you're trying to get them back to the website, even when we do a video, we embed that in our blog. Okay. And then we push that out. So when somebody clicks on that link, they're going to our website. So then hopefully they're then engaging in other things on our website as opposed to Facebook or as opposed to YouTube, right? The goal is always getting, especially in a product-based business, because the more you get them back to the site, the more they're like, oh, that's cool. You've got your little widget in the sidebar of like the latest fall features, and you want them to go down that rabbit hole. Okay. So that's kind of rule number one. Twitter specifically, we are using, so Twitter, different than Facebook. Obviously, Facebook can be a global market, but Twitter seems to be even more so of a global market where you're really focused on, especially since we're a location-based business, a little different than you. Facebook is really driven more on people in San Diego coming to our events and things of that nature. Whereas Twitter, we're really, we use Twitter for, obviously aggregating that blog information. So even if we're written up in another publication, we'll post that to our blog. If we have a blog every day, fine. Basically. Anytime, if we're written up in XYZ magazine or XYZ blog, we write a blog about it and then we push it out because you're still wanting to drive them back to your website, always back to the website.
So that's number one.
Takes a little more effort on your part when you can. So you're essentially, you might be creating a lot more blog posts than you are right now, which is fine. It's fine. And we're using it a lot to reach out to media.
Yes.
So essentially journalists that we want to stalk is what we call it.
In a nice way.
In a nice way. Give kudos to, compliments to, so to speak.
Right.
We are following them on Twitter and we are retweeting, we are commenting on their tweets, we are engaging them on Twitter.
Okay.
And also maybe Google Plus, and then we may go to a blog post that they write or an article they write and comment directly on that article. We call it giving them social media love.
Got it.
And it works pretty well. It's a tedious process because you're really having to be on it, so to speak.
Right.
But for me, I use my time standing in line at Costco, at a stoplight, at a whatever.
Don't say stoplight.
Okay, all right. Strike that. At line in the store.
There you go.
Or anytime I have downline, I'm on Twitter and I'm only focused on that notification setting pretty much. Because that's where people have engaged me or, responded to me or things of that nature.
Got it.
Yeah, it's a really good point because I've had that conversation with a number of members. They're like, I go to Twitter and I'm like overwhelmed, and I get it. That's why lists are good. And creating lists of journalists that you're following is good.
Yes.
You can have a public list or a private list. I usually keep my list private because I don't want people to know who I'm stalking.
Sure.
But just the simple answer is if I have that downtime, I'm on that notifications tab to see who's followed me so I can follow them back. If it's somebody prominent, I'll thank them for following me.
Right.
It's all about a dialogue, so to speak.
Okay.
But it can be really great to follow influencers and build a relationship with influencers in your industry. So not only journalists, but pros, folks that maybe manage buying for. I mean, it's amazing. This came through today. Skylar, who helps us manage our both my personal Twitter and Hera Hub's Twitter. We've been following the publisher editor. I'm going to screw this up. Anyways, publisher or editor of Fast Company. A woman named Christine. Yeah. And we've been, stalking her. And we finally, through a course of dialogue, got a response. And this is the other piece of it, and this is a little bit more advanced.
Sure.
But we're turning our blog into its own brand and its own channel of media. So we've named it the Hera Herald.
Okay.
And so our blog will be its own online magazine.
Yeah.
And so I've been asking prominent people like the new police chief of San Diego, who's going to be doing a video here next week.
Right.
To be in the Hera Herald. And we asked, Skylar asked basically, if we could interview the publisher of Fast Company for the Hera Herald. She said yes.
Excellent. Congratulations.
So it's it's almost kind of, creating your own media channel essentially.
Yes.
And, essentially if you did that, you could almost, you could create the Vivacity magazine or something like that.
Right.
And then, now and think about all the events you could go to as press. You're like, I'm press. Let me in for free.
But it is part of the strategies. I know, to your point, you do get so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
With beyond the, I have a product, obviously, a product-based business. Yeah. It's very visual.
Huge.
I've been getting a lot of great feedback from customers, both direct customers, buyers I'm dealing with. So how do I capture all that?
Absolutely.
And from what you're saying.
Yeah, so that specifically, you want your customers to be tweeting about it.
Yes.
So when they make a purchase, you want them, so you can do even canned tweets for them. If they make a purchase on your website, when they get, so this is kind of a big thing now, when they get to the confirmation page, you can have click to tweet. And so there's just a little embed code that they can put in. You can put in there and you can do this through Twitter. There's a number of channels you can do it through.
Sure.
But essentially, they can click a button and it'll open up a little browser in Twitter if they're active on Twitter.
Sure.
And it can say, I'm so excited that I just made my first purchase with Vivacity, and they can customize it a little bit, but it pre-populates the tweet you want with the hashtag, fall golf or whatever you want
it is. Right.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, because when somebody's made a purchase, they're excited and they want, and you want them to share. so you got a handwritten note from a customer.
Yes.
And she loves what you're doing.
Yes.
She's excited about it. You take a photograph of that and you're posting it on your social media. So
Right.
the one step further in that, if we can assume she's
Yes.
on social media. So let's just
Exactly.
make that assumption.
Let's make that assumption.
She might not be, but let's
Right.
make the assumption she is. So Twitter specifically, just staying on that thread, you're going to take a picture and you're going to say, we love our customers, hashtag love our customers, or
Okay.
whatever
Okay.
you want to really
Yeah.
kind of promote. And hashtags is a whole nother subject. We want to get into that.
Yeah, exactly.
So we love our customers. Thank you so much to, and then you're going, because you're going to tag that person. So assuming they're on Twitter, it's thank you so much, and you're tagging them at, Jane Doe, Florida,
Right.
or whatever. Thank you so much for this, and you're going to tag them. And so anybody that is connected with them is going to see that. Assuming you don't, here's one little random kind of crazy tip. Don't ever start a tweet by tagging somebody. Don't say at Vivian Sayward, because only people, if you're following each other, people that follow them and you are going to see that. It's some kind of quirky thing. So you could even thank you so much to at blah, blah, blah for the amazing testimonial, post a picture of it. And so again, you're tagging them, thanking them. So it's like a public display of affection, so to speak.
Yeah.
So you're acknowledging them, not only just in an email,
Right.
but publicly. And think about kind of that as a thought process in everything you do.
Okay.
And so when we have a member join, we're starting through this process now of even just shooting a quick picture of them in the lobby of hey, new Hera Hub member, and then tagging them on Facebook and Twitter specifically to say, so excited about having so-and-so as a new member, and we can do that on our private Facebook group too, but now their friends are seeing oh, so-and-so just joined Hera Hub, what is that kind of thing? And you're starting to get that traction. So it's that public display of affection that we'll call it, the new version of PDA.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just thinking through that and that's important to find out. Maybe in your checkout process, you can ask them, are you on Twitter? And have them put their handle.
Okay.
So you know you can kind of tag them. It's sometimes not as easy to find people if they're not going by their name or whatever.
Right.
So.
Which is funny as well.
Yeah.